Hi, and welcome to Game Design with Unity. I'm going to be your teacher, Image Wade. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go to the Unity website, and the first thing you're going to see is its webpage. And then what you're going to want to do is you want to click the Get Started button, and then go to the Individual tab, and then Get Started under Personal. Once the download is done, you're going to want to open up Unity, and then the first thing you're going to want to do is get all of your assets ready. You're going to want to get Native Sound FX, 8K Skybox Pack Free, Grass and Flowers Pack 1, Conifers Pack, the Terrain Tools Sample Assets, Outdoor Ground Textures, and Mini First Person Controller. So the next step what you're going to want to do is get your Skybox set up. As you can see, I already have a Skybox set up. But to do this, you're simply going to go to the left-hand side of the screen underneath the Assets tab, underneath the Skybox, and just click and drag whichever Skybox you would like to use. Next thing you're going to want to do is create your terrain. You can do this under the Hierarchy tab by simply right-clicking, going down to 3D Object, and then Terrain. Or additionally, you can go up to the top of the screen, go to Game Object, 3D Object, and Terrain. Either way will add the terrain for you. Now, the next step you're going to want to do is sculpt your terrain. This is going to give it more of a vibrant feel to it. You can put ridges and mountains and all sorts of other good stuff on the terrain. To do this, you go over to once the terrain is selected, you go over to the Terrain tab, go to Raise or Lower Terrain. Pick a brush that you would like to use, and then once you've done that, you can either left click multiple times and you'll get your terrain, or you can hold the left click button down and just drag. If you're having a hard time seeing what you're doing, you can go up to the top of the screen, hit the light button, and turn the light off. Now, the next thing you're going to want to do is add your first person controller. To do this, you go underneath the Assets tab, underneath First Person Controller, and then select the first person prefix, and just drag and drop onto the scene. Now, a good rule of thumb, what I like to follow is to sculpt the first person controller along the y-axis to 2 meters. That way it gives it a little bit of a height advantage, and the viewpoint comes from an average sized human being. Now, what you're also going to want to do is make sure that your controller isn't below the terrain. If it's even slightly below the terrain, when you start up the game, it will fall through the map. So to stop this, just make sure that you put it above the terrain and have it set up there. And if you click the game menu up at the top, you can see what the first person controller is seeing. Now, the next thing you're going to want to do is paint on some textures. To do that, you go back into the Terrain tab and click Paint Texture. Since we don't have any terrain layers, we're going to first hit Edit Terrain Layer and then Create New Layer. And doing this, you can create the first layer of your texture. Select whichever texture you like, and apply. Be sure that when you're in the terrain layer that you add the normal map, and you do this simply by opening up the texture, editing it, and then scrolling down and selecting the normal map that corresponds with the texture that you picked. This way it gives it more of an actual feel to the texture. And from here you can play around with the settings, the size, the offset, the smoothness, metallic settings, the normal scale settings, and just play around with it until you get your base texture the way that you want it. Doing this makes the texture look a little bit nicer, more realistic. Now if you wanted to add another texture, you'd follow the same steps as before. You'd edit layer, create new layer, pick a texture, add the normal map. The only difference is that with the second texture, it will not autofill like it did with the first. The second texture, you'll have to select the texture and then paint it on by left clicking and holding down. Now as you can see, we have a little bit better texture on the ground. This is our grass. And now we're going to add some trees. To add a tree, you would hit the Edit Tree, Add Tree, and then select tree from the pack that we have. And then once the tree is selected, just click Add, and you have the tree. Now there are two ways to plant the trees. The first one, much like the textures, you can paint them on. To do that, you simply click on the tree that you have, and then left click on the scene. And as you can see, we have trees popping up wherever our controller is. Now the second is mass place trees. To do this, select the tree that you want, and then enter the number of trees you would like to have on your terrain. And then just hit place. By doing this, it automatically populates your terrain with the trees that you've selected with the right amount of number. So if you hit 20,000 like we did, 20,000 trees are going to be on this terrain. And as you can see in the game menu, we have the trees. You have a nice little evening setting. It's kind of dark. And as you can notice, as you're walking around, you're bumping into the trees and not just walking straight through them. So it adds to that realistic aspect. Now in addition to this, the trees would also cast shadows if the light was a bit brighter. And if you added a wind aspect, they would also bend and blow in the wind as well. Now the next thing you're going to want to do is paint on some details. So grass and flowers. To do this, go to the Terrain tab and hit Paint Details. Since we don't have any details at the moment, go down to Edit Details, add New One, and then go over to the left and select a grass texture that you would like to use. And then much like the terrains and trees, you can paint it on. To do so, it's just like the textures in the trees. You just select the texture, or the grass in this instance, that you would like to paint on, and then drag, left click, drag, and paint. Now as you can see, the grass is kind of inconsistent with the textures and everything, the coloration is. So to change that, just go into Edit the grass textures. You can change the width, the height, the max height. You can even change the colors to make it fit your setting. And then to populate the world with grass, you just paint it on. As you can see here, we're just painting on the grass and getting a nice good coating of the area. Now, if you'd like to add another grass detail, you'd follow the same steps as before. Add grass detail, underneath the Edit Details, pick a new grass or flower type, and then, just like with the trees and textures, you would select the one that you want to place, and then click and drag to paint them onto the world. And as you can see, they're a little bit bigger, and the coloration is off. So again, go to the Edit Details, Edit, and then change all the settings for the grass here. You can do this just to get the grass to your desired look. Change the colors of the flowers, change the height and the width of the flowers so they look more realistic and fit your environment better. And then you just paint them on. Much like the other grass texture, you just paint them on. Now, the last thing you're going to want to do to make it a more immersive environment, you're going to want to add sound. To do this, go to the Nature Sound FX, find the sound that you're looking for, and then just drag and drop it into the scene. And now if we hit the play button, not only will you be able to see the flowers and the grass, and as you can see, the grass is blowing in the wind slightly, but you should also be able to hear the nature sound. I believe we chose Jungle 2. And with that, you are now certified to make your own 3D environment in Unity. You can use the tools that I've taught you to make your own and customize your own environments. And from here, you can then go on and add more game-like features. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video.